My name is Tom Wadelton. I'm going to be the facilitator for today's session. I'm really excited about today as we're talking about marketing and marketing related topics. Because I think if you ask most CPAs what role are they probably least comfortable filling, I think it's marketing and marketing related things. Can be uncomfortable, can be things that we're not particularly good at, things like that. So let me do a couple of administrative things and introductions, and then we'll get to our speaker. So I already said my name. I am one of the full-time virtual CFOs with Summit CPA Group. And also, in addition to that, I recently finished a term as the chair of the Indiana CPA Society, and I'm joining the board of governance for the AICPA. I say that just to kind of reinforce that one of the biggest things that those organizations focus on is education and helping us improve and having this growth mindset. So it's really important to me for that. Related to getting CPE for today, we are offering 1 credit of CPE, and you do need to attend the entire 50-minute session. We will go ahead and put up 3 poll questions, so we need people to answer all 3 of those questions. Having done that, you will get your certificate emailed to you. You'll also get information related to slides, video, and those kinds of things. So those are some of the common questions that we get. There's a question function to GoToWebinar, so that's the way that you interact with us. I'll be monitoring those, and we do try to answer almost every single question we get during the session. So we really hope that people will take advantage of doing that. So let's go ahead and meet our speakers for today. And you can see them there. So Jody Grunden is the co-founder and CEO of Summit CPA Group. Jody also won an award from CPA.net for the Innovative CPA of the Year. So congratulations for that, Jody.
Thanks.
Stephen Pope is one of our main speakers today, and Stephen is the founder and CEO of SGP Labs, and he'll tell you a little bit more about what he does. And then Kelly is our director of marketing at Summit CPA Group. So very important. We have a very active marketing and really good marketing team here, and so want to get her thoughts on that as a firm to complement what Stephen's talking about. So let me tell you just a little bit more about Summit, since I'm from Summit and so are Kelly and Jody. So we started in 2004, or since 2004, we've been providing both CFO, back office, and accounting services. In 2013, we became a fully distributed firm. So everyone working remotely, and then we've got the freedom of where employees work and then also where our clients are. And we currently have 55 employees throughout the world.
Yeah, and if I could add to that real quick, Tom, the way we structured our entire marketing program is more of an inbound marketing program versus an outbound, and we'll talk about that in detail. So with our clients, we're growing at a pace of about $1.5 to $2 million a year. Right now, we're a $7 million firm, to give you kind of a ballpark thing. But we haven't been that way for long. You know, back in 2013, we were probably just pushing $3 million, and it took us a while to get to that $3 million mark. So it hasn't been it hasn't been, just, hey, we started, boom, we're there. We went through a lot of trials and tribulations trying to get there. So I just want to give you some background on that. We pick up about 30 new clients a year. Average client we pick up is about $60,000, and 65,000, somewhere in that ballpark. And we have a 94% retention rate. So when we bring them on, we also keep them, which is really, really huge. And it all comes back to the marketing and positioning, which Steve's going to touch base on.
Great. Okay, so I'm gonna go ahead and jump in and see if you want to go ahead and get us started here.
Yeah, great. So I'm really excited to be here, guys. And I think even though we only have a short period of time together, we're going to be able to cover a lot of information and really give you guys some good direction on marketing and some strategy and tactics that you can take away and apply. And I'm looking forward to helping you guys do that. So let's get in. So we all want to grow our firm. We all want to grow our business. We want to grow the revenue. We want to charge what we're worth. We want to charge the fees that we feel like the value that we bring, and ultimately we want to get clients easier. That's the dream, right? But we all know that there is a certain grind in growing a professional service firm. It requires a lot of trust. It's hard to meet new clients. It's often easy to meet other professionals in your network, but actually getting access to those clients and having the time needed to communicate with them can be challenging. And you're often one step away from actually talking to clients when you're engaging people through a networking group. And then you're also just like sometimes you're just like waiting around for referrals from that networking group. And then beyond that, it's actually hard to stand out as well. I mean, every time I talk to a professional service provider, we all, including myself, we all think we're unique, and we are unique. But to the outside world, it's hard to portray that, especially nowadays with a flooded marketplace of everybody trying to say, we're the best, we do this, we do that. Everybody's attention span is quite low. And so even just through our websites, it's hard to communicate how we're actually different and how we actually stand out from everyone else. And then beyond that, we are limited to kind of one-on-one sales if we're just doing traditional networking. So it's like you as the owner of the company, you might not even actually have a sales team, but it's like you're always starting from scratch. You're always meeting somebody and then walking them through the whole process. And you might even be talking to somebody that isn't actually an ideal client for you. And so it absorbs a lot of your time. And even if you get past that initial point and you do have a business that's growing, it can be hard to scale past that initial owner, because the owner is doing all the sales. It's that owner is the single rainmaker, and it's really hard to actually like grow beyond that. Like it's hard to hire salespeople for professional services. And so the question is like, how can you actually be different? How can you build a trusted brand? How can you increase the word of mouth about your business in your networks, online, on the internet? And then ultimately, how can you build like an inbound pipeline? How can you have clients reaching out to you? How can you build that reputation that kind of spreads on its own? And the challenge really is that we know we should be marketing. This is an essential skill at this point, but it can be really overwhelming. We're not trained experts, and it's hard to know where to start. You don't want to waste time and money, and we don't really want to look bad either. We don't want to put ourselves out there and embarrass ourselves. We usually don't, but often we have those thoughts about things.
And Steve, if you don't mind, I'll go ahead and launch the first polling question so
Sure.
people see it on the screen. And as you remember, for getting CPE, you need to answer these questions. Okay, sorry, you can go ahead and continue.
Yeah, sure. And then from my perspective, it's like, so it is a bit overwhelming and it is hard, but it really shouldn't be that hard. When I was building my first professional service firm, I didn't start with any marketing skills. I was just an expert at my craft. I loved what I did. I was building software for other companies. And so that business was kind of slow to start. I did end up I was able to build that up over 12 years. I grew it to several $1 million in revenue. And I was able to acquire those marketing skills over time, but it took me a lot longer than I think it should have. And after that, I looked back and I was like, wow, I sold that company. And I looked back and I was like, wow, this really shouldn't have taken so long. And so as I started to build my next company, I really started to invest into, learning about internet marketing, content marketing, social media, and merging that with all of the skills that I had acquired in building my company.
Yeah, and I would say that's a big thing, right? Because you started off, you didn't really know what you were doing, you kind of fumbled your way through, you took some risks and some challenges and kind of figured out, hey, this actually works. And we did the same thing. We tried everything when we started. We sent out postcards. We had way back when we had the phone book, we had ads in the phone book. We did a lot of things, direct marketing. We tried to contact people. We knocked on doors. We did everything you could think of to figure it out. And you know what? They worked a little bit. We might have got one client from it. We may have two. Mm-hmm. But until we actually settled down into the type of marketing that Steve was going to talk about, it really didn't. There was no velocity to it. It wasn't an overnight success. And so the key there is really getting that pull market where you're bringing people into the firm, versus trying to go out and get it. And that's the key. You got to take that risk.
Yeah, exactly. It's like I learned that I was building that company on thought leadership. We were making content, but what I realized after was how you could accelerate that and really do it a lot faster and build the firm faster. And that's what I've really been doing ever since then, is like working with companies like Summit in both a group mastermind setting and also on one-on-one, and helping them think through strategy, the tactics, and deploy those skills and the technology needed to actually get this content built and get it deployed and get people actually seeing it, so that you can kind of establish yourself as the go-to expert in the industry. And one of the main things that I've learned, even at my previous company, was, consistency drives the results. So, one of my clients, they're getting, 2 to 3 leads a month, and they're really actually only posting on LinkedIn twice a week. But the key is that they post on Tuesday and Thursday, and they've been doing it very consistently. And they also post helpful information that kind of establishes them as the expert. And since I started my new company, I've gotten at least 50% of my new business from LinkedIn, and a lot of that new business is actually people reaching out to work with me. And one interesting thing that happened, it's more calls than that I put on the slide. It's changed since I created this, but one post over this Christmas break has generated 6 book calls. Now, I'm not going to say that that's typical. Like, I'm not saying every time I post I get 6 calls, but it does consistently generate calls. And the more consistent that I've been, the more I've been able to learn, and therefore I've gotten better at doing that. And this is what also allowed me to grow my previous business to millions of dollars of revenue, and then also making the Inc. 5,000 fastest growing companies.
Yeah, I think Stephen hit it around the nose. Consistency is really the key there out of everything. From I'd say 2000, probably 2006 to now, we've blogged every single day, which you might think about, that's a lot, but we did. Every day of the week we blog, Monday through Friday. We don't blog on the weekend, so 5 days a week we have articles, content going out. In addition to that, we have routine articles going out in other forms outside of the blog. So it's a continuous thing that Kelly's constantly putting out material, not once when she gets the chance to, but every single day, every single week something goes out, every single month. It's just on a very consistent basis, and that is really the key to this. Because if you try to do it yourself on when you can do it, it's just really tough, because you might have things going on. You may push it back a couple of days, everything comes up that pushes that writing that article or doing that blog, and you can't have that happen. This has got to be a priority if you want this to work out well. Is that consistency?
Yeah, and to that point, like, I post on LinkedIn every day. I made that commitment last year, and I got my first client within a week, and then I think I got kind of lucky, but ever since then, I've just been posting every day, and that's kind of how I learned and kind of built the following that I have. So real quick, it's like, how do we get there? So we've been talking about that. It's content marketing. It's creating educational material that not only your potential clients can learn from, but also other professionals that might spread the word about you as well. And then really kind of focusing that content from a thought leadership perspective is like really trying to like position yourself as the expert in your field, the leader in your field, the expert of experts. And we'll talk a little bit about how to do that. And then also using social media to push these ideas out there. And one of the things that I think is exciting about this is that I think, especially in professional services, there's a huge opportunity here, because I think professional services is one of the last holdouts for the digital revolution. Is like, not many professional service firms are taking advantage of this. You see it a lot in startups, you see large corporations doing this, but the small firms are not. And it's time to realize that marketing is an essential skill for business. And you don't need to be a master, but you do need to be dangerous enough with marketing to build your firm. So what is thought leadership? When I started to go on this new journey, I used to be in technology. I built a technology company, and now I'm a marketer. And when I set out to take this leap, I started to think, what is a thought leader? Because to a certain degree, you can have like an imposter syndrome when you start to go down these roads. It's like you're like, who am I to do this? So I kind of set out on myself to really decide, what is thought leadership? Because it's like, people talk about influencers and thought leadership, but I wanted to know, like, what is this? And I kind of came to a basic understanding, which is all thought leadership really is someone that can look into the future, can identify opportunities, can identify risks, and can bring those back to an audience, a community, a group of people, and articulate those ideas so that those people can take advantage of that opportunity or can avoid those risks. And it's really not any more complicated than that. And so if you have those thoughts, if you have those ideas, and most of us do, then you can be a thought leader. You don't have to really worry much more about it than that. Now there is a couple. Yeah, go ahead.
And I think this has been key for us for sure. When we first started, we did like I said, we did everything we could, and then we thought, well, hey, let's do this SEO thing. It was kind of new back then in 2004, 2005, and we thought, hey, let's figure this out. And then we came up with the virtual CFO and thought, hey, this is great. So our thought leadership was we're going to offer virtual CFO services, something that no one else is doing. And we thought, oh, people are just going to come to us like crazy. And we found that we got maybe 1 to 4 calls a year. Wasn't a ton. And so we thought, wow, this is kind of weird. We thought this was going to be great. And then once we started narrowing it and say, hey, we're not going to just do virtual CFO services, but we're going to do virtual CFO services in an area that we've got a concentration of clients. And at that time, we had 2 clients that were creative agencies. We thought, oh, this would be great. I love working with these folks. This is perfect. I'm going to become a thought leader in this. And so we started focusing and narrowing that niche. Instead of being a thought leader for everybody, we're a thought leader now for just this really narrow area of the practice. And it was amazing, the response we received. Instead of getting 1 to 4 a year, we picked up like 11 clients in 1 month. And the next month we picked up like 7. And it was like 6. It was like, oh my gosh, what's going on here? It was great, but at the same time it was alarming because it's like we don't have the staff to manage this. That's how quickly that thought leadership came, because they were now coming to us versus us again going to them, which was the key to the whole thing. Now we do pick up about 2.5 clients a month, and we've kind of over the years we've massaged the pricing and everything so that we weren't picking up, the 8 to 11 clients and just really killing our team. So we got into that really nice sweet spot. We could do that because thought leadership, when you're doing that, it inevitably generates higher price tickets for for your service. Now you can command a higher dollar amount because you not only know virtual CFO services, but virtual CFO services, and all the metrics that a brewery needs to know in order to be profitable, or a doctor needs to know, or a dentist needs to know, or it could be any pest control company. It can be whatever that narrow niche is, but the key there is being that thought leader, and the thought leadership will drive tons of business to your company.
Yeah, that's a great point, and that really kind of goes to the strategy and really kind of deciding what you're going to talk about. It's like you really want to have a niche, and you really want to be able to, to talk specifically about an industry. Because one thing I will say is that somebody from the outside, that sees a lot of content from, from accountants, from CPAs, from financial advisors, they very typically talk a lot about like the very specifics of accounting and being a financial advisor, and how do you deduct your home office and just kind of, and like 401k stuff. And for me, it's harder for me to stay engaged in that. But when I do see other people creating content that's a little bit more related to my industry, so number one, I'm an entrepreneur, so I love stuff about being able to grow my business, which all of these, all CPAs and accountants and financial advisors, they all know how to do this. They're doing it for themselves and they're helping their clients do it. So you have a lot of content to talk about in terms of growing a business, being an entrepreneur. You also have a lot of industry expertise. If you're working with technology companies, you know how startups work, you know how tech companies work. Summit knows how digital agencies work. They know how hourly billing works. So when you start to create content that is more, outside of your expertise, but in the realm of where these companies are, then the content is a lot more digestible, and it's something that I would want to read on a regular basis. So if it's like I'm a marketer, I'm growing a business. If you have stuff to help me do that, or to run my business better, which you do know how to do, then when you create content around that, I will be much more likely to stay engaged with what you're saying, as opposed to actually shutting it out. When I get content that's just like continually going on the same subject about tax stuff, it's harder for me to digest it because it's not what I'm interested in. I want to hire somebody to help me do that.
Yeah, and to kind of add to that, I mean, it's really simple, right? You take that tax article that you just wrote, and then you add hey, here's how a creative agency uses this deduction, or here's how a brewery is going to use this deduction to improve things. So you can actually customize it really easily, give them that same information, but now they think, oh, this is specifically for us. And it's kind of funny how that information gets forwarded to other clients. And again, it's the same information that you could have given them otherwise.
Yeah, exactly. And it's about creating that stuff that's shareable. And so then, real quick also, when you're thinking about your strategy, it's like, also like, who are other players in the industry? What other, thought leaders or influencers could you mingle with and give presentations with? Like here I am with Summit. I'm collaborating with them to give a presentation. So it's like, you have to think a little bit strategically about what other influencers can I connect with and give value to them. So you can kind of connect with other people as well that you might not otherwise be able to connect with. And then also thinking about your audience. And it's like, we always typically think about our clients first, but there are other professionals in the space that you can provide resources to them, and they might be able to provide those resources to their clients. So what financial advisors do you know? What lawyers do you know? What content can you give to them that they could use as a resource that they could give to their clients? So it's important to think a little bit outside of your own client base as well. And then, again, just thinking about distribution, we'll talk a little bit more about that too, but like, you do have to think about like where these people are, because you want to be able to reach them. So it's important to think, like what social platforms are they on and whatnot. And we'll talk a little bit more about that as well.
Steve, are you okay if I go ahead and launch another poll question?
Yeah, sure.
Okay. Okay, so you can go ahead.
Cool. And then one other thing to think about too is like, thought leaders are typically generating ideas. And I think it's nice to have a little bit of a framework to do so. And so I like to, so I really kind of think there's basically 4 different types of ideas. There's like purely original ideas, which are actually pretty rare. It's rare that one of us comes up with a truly original idea. If you do, great, but that's not a requirement for being a thought leader. You can very easily just take an existing idea and sharpen it. You can just like make it a better idea. You can refine it a little bit more and articulate it a little bit better, improve it, or you can join 2 ideas together and make a better idea with using 2. Or you can actually just transport ideas from one industry into another. So for instance, like I mentioned, startups are it's very commonplace for startups to be using content marketing to grow. But it's less common for professional service firms. So what I'm doing is I'm transporting ideas from other industries that do this all the time and presenting it to an industry that doesn't use it as much. And that way, it's like I can increase the value of what I do just because I'm taking something from one market to another that is less experienced with it. And then of course you can do all of the above where you're sharpening ideas, joining ideas together, and then transporting ideas. So you can mix and match it as well.
Stephen, this seems to fit really well. And if I look at the poll results, 70% of our people said they're not doing any of the above, the blog posts, videos, or workshops.
Right.
So it sounds like a really good opportunity for people to get started doing some of those things.
Yeah, I mean, that's the thing, that I think this is an untapped market.
Mm-hmm.
And to that point, I think, so I guess we're kind of like, we keep saying this, but it's important to be creating engaging and shareable content. You've got a lot of options: workshops, informational videos, you can do webinars, you can do podcasting. But I think when someone looks at this, they get a little overwhelmed. It's like, what am I going to talk about? Who's going to listen? Where do I find people to actually come to these things? And it's like, is there a podcast that already does what I talk about? But in reality, it's like, you can't figure all that stuff out ahead of time. It's ultimately impossible. So really, the main challenge is just picking something and starting and getting going with it, seeing what works and seeing what doesn't. And to be honest, it's like I tell people, like, even if your first webinar is a complete flop and no one comes to it, that's actually a win, because you've kind of learned something. You've learned what not to do the next time. I know that might seem a little backwards, but it's quite true, because you ultimately just need to figure these things out and learn what people actually want.
Yeah, Kelly, just kind of curious. We use all four of these, obviously. We heavily in workshops, vlogs, webinars, podcasts. What brings the most to us out of those four, do you know, as a percentage?
Well, the most, oh gosh, as a percentage, I mean, all of them do, but the one thing that stood out to me the most about that poll, the 7% of people who responded to the poll are doing video. And that was one of the things that we wanted to focus on last year, because we identified that in the industry, video is really rare, that accountants are not typically putting their face on video and out in the world. So we made a conscious effort last year to focus on that. So we have our podcast, which we launched actually the end of 2019, but really got rolling in 2020. But we converted it to be video. So the audio is all available in all the podcast places. But then we also have a video version of our podcast on YouTube. And we made an effort to then put all of our webinars on YouTube, put those podcasts, any other video stuff that we're doing, and add to our presence on YouTube. And I pulled up our results. I was telling Stephen this number yesterday. We just, this is the beginning of the year, so end of the year we look at what are all our numbers for the analytics for the end of the year, and our website traffic from YouTube increased by 2,850% in 2020.
Wow.
Now, I'm not an accountant, you guys are, so you're all going, okay, but what are the actual numbers, right? Like, so we went from a very small number to a much bigger number, but the bottom line is it showed me that a lot of the video efforts that we're doing are unique in the industry and are contributing to an increase in traffic and leads for us.
Yeah, and also what I also kind of want to point out to you is, like, I think there's a lot of misconceptions about podcasting in general. I think podcasting is actually one of the best formats, because with a workshop, with an informational video or a webinar, you do have to think ahead and plan something out. But what's neat about a podcast is that, number one, you don't always have to create your own original content, because you can just do interviews. So you can reach out to people in your industry, people that you'd actually like to work with. So that's a great way to start conversations with somebody that you might actually really want to work with. But it's just an interview style. So not only will you learn a lot by talking to somebody that's in a different industry, but you can record it, and you don't have to come up with the content every week. And plus, people really want to be on podcasts. So this is just a great way for you not only to create content, and like Kelly was saying, is you can do it on video. So podcasting has this connotation that it's only audio. You can take the audio out of it and push that to audio platforms, but you can do video as well. You can meet people, you can learn more about your target market, and then down the road, it will also gain traction as a podcast as well. And when you have something like this, it really does start to establish you as an expert. When people see that you have a podcast, it adds to you being the person that has thoughts to share. And especially yeah, go ahead.
I was just gonna say, I was surprised when I asked one of my clients if they would be on our podcast, how excited they were to do it. And so it felt like I was asking a favor, and they were energized by being on a podcast and also had a certain message they wanted to share. So as you mentioned, people like being on podcasts, and it was a pretty easy sell.
Yeah, and as well as you can always, you can sell it to them when you reach out to them, as well as you can say, hey, I'd love to hear your story. I'm going to publish I'm going to publish the podcast here. I'd be glad to give you the recording as well. And what I do as well is I actually make small clips of them talking, and then after the show, I will send those clips to them and let them post that on social media, which is interesting as well, because now I'm being seen and being heard in their networks as well. So it's a real interesting way to kind of spread the word. And you really don't have to worry about, are you the only one talking about this? Because you're probably not. There's probably several different, there's lots of marketing podcasts. There's lots of accounting podcasts, I'm sure. But if you really actually look, probably many of those are actually inactive, because most people start and then stop. They don't really keep it up. And then also, it's like you have your own personality, and that's going to come through, and that's ultimately what's going to make you different anyway. So don't be discouraged if there are other people that have that stuff. And then also, don't forget that I think it was Nielsen, they're talking about how podcasting is probably going to double, the listenership is going to double at least double by 2023. So here's where, again, where we can talk about like repurposing. And I think this is where a lot of that power comes from is repurposing this content. So you can take this 30-minute presentation that you did, or a 30-minute podcast or whatever, and you can process this and push this to a lot of different places. And I think this is where the power comes, because if you're doing an hour-long podcast or a 30-minute podcast each week, that could be enough content to distribute to really all the places that you need. Now Summit has 3 podcasts, and they have a lot more, but at a small scale, you don't really need that. So you can take your podcast, your videos, and you can push those to YouTube, and that's what I do. You can embed them on your website. So not only do I put them onto YouTube, but then I put it on my website. I also transcribe all of that into text, and I get the SEO value from that. And then also lets me create almost a week's worth of content. So I have somebody go through the video and pull out 30 second to 2 minute clips that I can then post on LinkedIn. I'm going to be posting those to other places as well. But now I have small clips of me saying smart things, or my guests saying smart things. And I'm sitting right next to them. And then it also goes out to all the podcasting platforms. So there's 15 podcasting platforms that you can easily push this stuff out to. And then you can also push it to your email list if it's valuable content. And you can drop it into relevant forums and communities that you're a part of if you think it's appropriate. And then honestly, you can hand deliver these pieces of content to potential clients. I was just talking to a client, or a potential client 2 weeks ago, and it just so happened that we were talking about something, and I was able to say, oh, I just recorded a podcast on this, go check it out. And they consumed the whole thing, which is really awesome, because they saw my personality, they saw what I was doing. They also saw me talking to an industry expert. So it really just bolsters your the perception of you in multiple ways. And the genius of this is that you're only spending an hour a week on it, as opposed to writing blogs that could take a long time. I mean, it's like you can really create a lot of content and a big presence with a little effort.
Yeah, but yeah, this is huge, because I mean, when we started doing the blogging, of course, it was me doing it daily, and it just took me forever. I'm not the creative type where I can come up with an article just like that, and I'm not sure that there's many people on this call that can do the exact same thing. Some writers can write something in 15 minutes and it looks really great. For me, I'd spend that same hour and a half writing that 15-minute article. But the nice thing about this is that through the blogging or the podcasting, or just simply a recorded interview, a writer can take that, 3 different writers can take that same interview and write 3 separate articles and come up with 3 separate tones, 3 separate ideas, and you've got one conversation, like Stephen was saying. It took me an hour, 15 minutes, half hour, whatever it was, to go through the interview, the podcast, or whatever, and they were able to reproduce that and have many articles, and which makes it really nice, because then it's just that time thing, the process thing. So repurposing is huge when it comes to being efficient.
Yeah, that was a part of our in our conscious effort to focus on video. We also then took all of the video that we were doing and did exactly that. We made sure that we were using that content in various ways. Not just all of those things that you described, Stephen, we do. And so we put our podcast episodes on the blog, we have them transcribed, so we have the SEO benefit of that. But then we also, and then we share them on all the social media channels, and we put them on YouTube. But then we also, use what those questions that we're answering, or those main topics that we're covering, we use that to convert those into articles. And then we really, a couple years ago, our goal was to get, not just our blog articles out there, but to put out guest posts in various locations. And taking those podcast episodes and turning those into content made it so that we now have just hundreds of articles ready to go for any topic, any location at any time, because we put so much content out there that we just kind of created a content machine with it.
Yeah, exactly. And it's interesting too, because sometimes people overcomplicate it again, and they say, well, how can I just put 30 seconds or 90 seconds of a clip on LinkedIn, for instance? And what's interesting about that is that you don't even have to have a complete idea all the time. What you're really trying to show is that human side. Where is that section in the podcast where somebody was talking passionately about something, or was talking about something that's valuable? And what ends up happening is that people actually connect with the energy and the humanity of the clip, and then they're drawn in to learn more. So it's not even like you have to like have a 5-minute clip or have the complete idea. Sometimes it can start in a random spot and even end in a random spot, as long as you're conveying mostly the energy that was behind that discussion. And then often people will want to watch the full thing because they saw that, or they just, at least they stopped and watched and will remember to see the content that you produce the next time. And then you guys also made the comment about blogs. It's important to remember you can also repurpose blogs. One mistake I do see with people is when they go to something like LinkedIn, they will often just make a link to their blog, and in reality they're kind of missing out, because the blog usually has 3 to 5 major points, and you can actually use one of those individual points as a single LinkedIn post. So you can turn one blog into 5 different posts instead of trying to just link to the blog itself, which most people won't actually even click anyway. And so one thing to keep in mind though, as you get into this, is that, so most of the time you hear people saying, make content, do a podcast, do this, do that. But one thing in my own story that I kind of didn't really realize until after the fact is you really want to be optimizing what you do. And before you move on to a different channel, before you expand, you really want to make sure that you're looking at the actual outcomes that your content is producing. Like, are you getting likes and comments? Are you getting a response? Are people watching it? And you can find these analytics in the various platforms that you're posting to. YouTube will give you these analytics. LinkedIn will give you these analytics. People will actually respond. They will write a comment. They will ask questions. The biggest mistake I see on social platforms is people log on to LinkedIn, or they publish something on YouTube, and they don't actually even respond to people that are commenting or look at what they're doing, and they're missing on the most important part, which is the feedback. Because what you ultimately want to do is learn from what you're doing and produce better content, because it's pretty rare that one of us sits down and just has the masterpiece. We know exactly what the person wants to hear, we create it, and they just love it. If that happens, great, but for most of us, you start somewhere and then you learn. And so one of the biggest values that I've had over, like, this is why consistency is important. One of the biggest values that I've had is that I've looked at all the comments that people give me in my LinkedIn posts or on YouTube or wherever that is, and they'll ask follow-up questions, or they'll say, yeah, this was really interesting. So that gives me feedback into what I'm doing, so I can hone that in the future. I can say, okay, this kind of guest on my podcast does really, really well. This one doesn't. People drop off the conversation at this point. What was it that I said? So you have to really kind of look at what you're doing and make sure that you're improving that before you just decide that this is a good platform or this isn't a good platform.
Stephen, you mentioned LinkedIn a couple different times. I'm going to go ahead and launch the last polling question that has to do with how people are using LinkedIn. We did have a comment just reinforcing, Octavia mentioned really liking the idea of taking one blog post and turning it into 5 LinkedIn posts. I'm curious, in your process, when you start a blog post, is that kind of your thinking, is while you're writing it, here's how I'm going to break it apart, or just sort of how do you think through taking one thing and then dividing it up later?
Yeah, you don't need to think about it that much. It's just all I do. And now I have built some systems and processes around to help me facilitate all these different things that I'm doing. And that is an important part as you start to develop this, because you need some systems and processes to remind you to do certain things and to help you track what you're doing. But no, you don't really need to do that. All you do is, when you're finished with your blog, just have something that triggers and reminds you or your team to just say, okay, all you have to really do is, like, what are the headlines? What are the bullet points that are coming across here? And then each of those is basically a post. It's not going to be the complete idea, so you have to get away from the fact that you're not going to be able to explain the entire blog in a single post. But in reality, like LinkedIn is a news feed, so people aren't going there to actually to read an entire post. So if you just give a little nugget from that's not even tied to the other pieces, people will still find that interesting. And then what you can always do is at the end of that post in LinkedIn, you actually write it out into the content. And then at the bottom of that LinkedIn post, you can say, hey, I linked the full article in the first comment. And if the person found that post interesting, then they can go ahead and just go to the comment and follow it through. There's some algorithmic reasons why you want to do that. LinkedIn doesn't actually want you to link to other platforms because they want you to stay on the platform. Most people want to stay on the platform anyway as well. So it's important to not link your blog or to external sites in the post itself. You want to do that in a comment and just direct people to go to that comment.
Okay.
Is there a trick you figured out?
Only...
Yeah. Is there a trick you figured out to get people to engage a little bit easier? I mean,
well, number one is consistency, because like you start to develop relationships. So a lot of the times, the people that you see engaging in content, they're people that are there often, and so that pushes it out. That pushes when other people are engaging on your content, that pushes it into further and further networks. It's kind of like the organic reach of LinkedIn. It's always good to have a call to action. Like they could say, hey, what is your experience with this? You definitely want to have like a call to action on the post to drive someone to do something, because if you don't ask people to do something, they often won't. But that's one of those things that takes consistency and practice as well. So yeah.
So the more content you're putting out there, the more the person's gonna actually feel comfortable then responding back and engaging.
Yeah, and then actually going out and engaging with the content of other people. And it's like if there's a professional you want to work with, you can go engage in their content. Now I'll talk a little bit about that as well. But that's kind of playing the LinkedIn game and like really investing in the platform and treating it like a platform.
And something you mentioned before about that, Stephen, that I assume you would say is answering people when they do engage, right? One of the ways to get people to engage is go ahead and engage with them. Don't just let them respond and then not take any action at all.
Yeah, it really surprised me. A lot of the time I'll go to somebody's page and I'll look at a comment and there'll be like 4 or 5 comments there of people like asking questions, wanting follow up and there's just no response. And you can imagine, like if you spent a couple minutes or a minute asking somebody a question on their content and they didn't even respond, you can imagine what that person is going to walk away feeling. It's like, it's just they basically wasted their time, and then they know that you're not really there to engage.
Yeah, that's a good point.
Yeah, so on that point of leveraging LinkedIn, and we'll talk a little bit more about the things we're talking about, is like, this is a place that you can generate business from, and there's a lot of cool ways to do that. You can sign a client without them ever having to even see your website. So you can see on the left there, that's my profile. That's how many people, 1,800 people have gone to see my profile in the last 90 days. And my profile is a landing page. It is my website. So I'm very meticulous in terms of laying out. It's like a landing page, and that's where my sales process starts. And by making content, I'm able to drive people to my landing page, my profile. And because I'm out there also commenting on other people and people that I'd like to potentially work with and engaging with them, not pitching them, but just like starting conversations. They said something interesting about this, and so I start talking with them about that and their content. Then they end up looking at your profile. And if you have a nice tagline in your profile that says, I help startup companies with their accounting or whatever that is, people will see that even in your content, in your comments. So really, really building out those connections and doing true engagement, posting valuable content, not stuff that's promoting yourself, but really, really giving to the community is a way to really drive people to to see your profile. And I
Yeah.
just like, go ahead.
Yeah, I think that's key there. I mean, to thought leadership, right? I mean, you don't want to be the salesperson. You know, when we go to a conference, we're not trying to sell our service. We're trying to educate the end user, you know, the client. You know, the same thing here. You don't want to end with, you know, hey, come buy our service here now. It's more, hey, we want to be that thought leader. We want to educate you, and because we're educating you, in turn, you know, you eventually get the links back or the you know, the follow-ups from them.
Yeah, and I'll talk a little bit more about how to think about doing that. But also just, I like people to think about, like, LinkedIn is just like a networking group. You have to treat it the same way. If you go there and you just try to sell to everybody in the networking group, then you'll be the least popular person there. The most popular people at the networking groups are the people that run it and the people that are giving each other referrals and giving each other advice. The best thing about LinkedIn is that you can do this at scale. So like, I make a post, and pretty much every one of my posts gets 1,000 to 10,000 views a day. You know, I'm approaching 1 million views since I started. And so that's like, where else are you going to get that many people to see who you are? I mean, that's a lot of exposure. And here's just a couple of examples of people that just reach out to me based off of content that I put out. You know, I did one post and I got 6 people doing this. And so it's just like, they just want to book a call with me. They saved my post and they're like, hey, I'd just love to hear more about this. And that puts me in a great position to be like, that just flips the whole script in terms of the sales call. If you see a lot of people doing the automated messages, there's like, hey, you know, buy my services, that puts you in a weak position. Whereas this, they're coming to me and now they see me as the person that may have the answer to their issues. And
Stephen, we just got a question that I think applies to all this that people are talking about. Do they need to hire someone to do this? And do you recommend outsourcing this? And sort of, who would you outsource all of this to?
I think outsourcing is an option, but the trick is like, you kind of have to know what you're doing before you can outsource it. If you outsource some of this stuff, it's like, how can you outsource being human until you've kind of mastered the flow? So like, I don't outsource this, but what I've done is I've created a very regimented process that I go through to get on LinkedIn, do what I need to do, and then I get out. I don't sit there, I don't go into the feed and just kind of, you know, it's like, I have a very specific process that I go through. So I don't actually recommend that people do automated messages or hire an assistant until they kind of know the lay of the land and they know how the system works. Because you're building a sales process. I mean, this is like I guess the way I would say it is like, how would you hire an assistant to go network for you?
Sure.
It would be kind of hard. Now, if you are an experienced business person and you hire somebody, you can train them on how to be a networker, but you'd want to be able to do that. Otherwise, you're trying to short circuit something, and it just doesn't ever work that well.
What about in a case like this? And here's something that we've done internally, but I could see this being outsourced. So early on, when I started working with Summit, Jody asked me if I would write a blog article. I had never written one, so that was kind of intimidating to say I'm going to write this whole thing. Well, Kelly's team worked with me where they said, you do a draft and we'll turn it into a presentable blog article.
Sure.
Could you see something like that with maybe it's an outsourced technical writer or someone that says, I've got the ideas and I know what I want to say, but someone else has to make it sound presentable?
Of course. Yeah. So that's what I advocate for, is just like, you are the expert. You can't outsource the expertise. If you can build systems and processes to support you, I have people that support me as well, but there are certain things that you have to kind of be responsible for. You have to be responsible for that original idea. And you want to be responsible for the output. So you can come up with a strategy and put the ideas in the top, but once that stuff goes through the pipeline, you want to be on the other side, and you want to look at the output. You want to say, okay, this represents my brand, this represents my expertise, and if it doesn't, then you try to improve that system. You just don't want to like outsource. You don't want to outsource the expertise. Is the best way I can put it.
Makes a lot of sense.
Yeah, we're kind of coming up on time here, so I'm just trying to see. And then I guess the key here is that I do have a very specific process. So when I come in the day, I will make my post, and then I usually have a selected list of people that I'd like to talk to. I use Sales Navigator, and that allows you to make very targeted searches for people. And I will make lists of them. But what I don't do is then start messaging all those people. So let's say you message 100 people, you probably, if you're lucky, maybe one of them responds. But the problem is that you burn 99% of the other people. And like, they don't know who you are. They might not even need your services at the time. So you really just kind of come more across as an annoyance. And you've probably been on the other side of that. We all get those messages, and it kind of hurts your brand. So the approach I take is a little bit more long-term, but it generates a much better result. It is, I have that list of people, but what I do is I actually go out and I engage with them in their content, or I try to engage with them in some meaningful way before I actually try to talk with them. And that way I have a relationship with them. So instead of trying to reach 100 people in 2 months, what I try to do is create 100 relationships over a couple months, slowly, and then let them like mature into real relationships. I don't think of them as leads. I think of them as relationships.
I do have another question, Jody. This might be as much for you, but I'd be interested in Stephen's thought also. So do I ask a question about if you're hosting a webinar, should you be charging for it? And does it look more professional if you're doing that, or make you look like more of a leader if you charge it? You want to talk about how you think about it?
The question is, I mean, does this, we're not charging for this, so does this lower our credibility? I hope not. We have a lot of people that attend them, so I would say no. It's up to you if you want to charge for it or not. I think you're going to get more people attending them, and the idea is getting more people in the bucket. Now, there's going to be folks in the attendance that probably is not going to be an ideal client. That's okay. Who knows? They may hear something great and recommend somebody else. I would never limit the people, and I think by charging, a lot of times you limit. Now, Stephen, you might have a completely opposite view than that, and I'd love to hear your take on that as well.
No, I really agree. I think the concept of gating things is kind of going away, because ultimately you want people to experience what you have. There might be an appropriate place to charge for a webinar, but I don't think that would be your ongoing marketing strategy. That would be like you have like a one-time thing where your team spends a month putting something together, and it's like an actual course or something like that. Yeah. Where you want to charge for it.
I think it depends a lot on your marketing strategy. If your strategy is to sell something, if you're trying to build a course, a masterclass, and sell that, then that's one thing. But the webinars and workshops and just speaking engagements, things like that, are lead generators that aren't intended to bring in direct revenue. It's to bring people in, get them familiar with you, to build your audience, your followers. So it just depends on kind of what your strategy is around one or the other, whatever you're going to work on.
Yeah, exactly. You want people to see your stuff. In fact, it's best often not to even gate it and try to get people's email addresses. The more you can get them to see who you are, the better. And so just like a couple key takeaways is that consistency wins. One of the biggest mistakes I see professional service providers do is they start and stop their marketing efforts. And the biggest problem with that is that you never end up seeing any sort of result, even bad or good. And so I see people get into this loop where they just say marketing doesn't work. And it's like intuitively, no, we know that's not true. But people walk away feeling like that because they never even get the bad result. They just get no result. And so they just stop doing it because so you have to finish an objective through, a campaign through, and learn from it and walk away and say, oh, I see why that didn't work. That was silly. We did that. That was not good. And then you learn from there. So try to be consistent. Remember that it takes a few interactions with your content before people will buy from you. So it's not like they just see one thing and that's going to be the closed deal. But this is the way you kind of scale your sales, is that people can learn about you and learn about your products and services through your content. And by the time they do talk to you, you're not starting from scratch. And
yeah, and kind of add to that real quick. When we started doing it with the training seminars, we were actually speaking in front of very qualified individuals, 30 owners of companies that we wanted to actually, do business for. And it took us I think we did 4 seminars over a period of 6 months. We didn't see a single result in that 6-month period. But once month 7 hit, we had 11 clients just like that. Then it just continued to go. So consistency is really important, and don't give up too quickly, I guess, which I think is a big failure.
Right. And as you start to deploy these things, I think systems and processes are pretty vital, because it's like how your team knows what to do. Like my LinkedIn strategy is pretty buttoned down. Like I go in and I go out. I'm not just kind of browsing around in there wasting time. I get in, I do the things I need to do. I engage with the people, I post my content, I respond, and I get out and I get back to business. And when I do my podcast, all of the things that happen after that, my video editor knows exactly what to do. I have software that takes us through a very systemized, process, and that took time to build as well. And you just have to have patience to build that stuff out. But the systems and the processes are vital. Otherwise, people kind of go crazy, because it can be a little bit of a chaotic process to do all this stuff. And so, like if you're interested in something like this, I do offer a thought leadership accelerator. I've come up with a marketing framework that I basically help people implement. I call it the content marketing framework. I help people grow revenue, build a trusted brand, and get clients reaching out to call, or getting clients to call you. And I basically kind of think of this as like a plugin system, where I help you think through like the way you're going to create content, and then I help you think through the way you're going to distribute that. And I kind of do that through a concept of plugins. And I also run a mastermind for marketing, professional service firms. Summit's a part of that, and they've been a part of that as well. So if that sounds interesting to you, you can reach out and give me an email. That's it.
Find him on LinkedIn.
Sounds great. So Stephen, we have a couple of offers for people who participated today. So if you like this, we talked a lot today about engagement, other things. So if people want to keep learning, they can tune into our Modern CPA Success Show. As Kelly mentioned, this is on YouTube. It's also on podcast channels. Stephen's actually going to be one of our guests in the fairly near future, so you can continue listening to him. Around the engagement side, we have a pretty active community on Slack. People who are sharing information. We share information about the webinars. There's a marketing channel. There's a book club channel. Even places where lots of CPAs are coming in, just saying, has someone dealt with this? And they're helping each other answer questions and things. So great opportunity to be with some like-minded people. In addition to that, on the next slide, you'll see that we have a course. So if people want to learn about the virtual CFO playbook, how to land 60,000 per year clients, and Jody, you can remind me, I think last year our average is about 67,000, the 2.5 or so that we were getting per month. So we're seeing those kind of results in our business. You can see what's included from a 15 module course. As people finish the course, we get a free coaching session. And so we sit down one-on-one and talk about how you might be trying to implement it, challenges, how that is going. Every single week, there's a group of people that happens on Tuesday where people are talking about how this is going, and we answer questions and have some specific topics that we talk through those. So a great way to stay engaged with the content that's there. You do join that community. There's a book, Building the Virtual CFO Firm in the Cloud, that you get. And also we have some discounts on the software and things that we recommend in there. So that's a course that we are really excited about. And we're hearing some really positive feedback from people who are going through and taking that. And then the final slide, you can see other connections. If you want to follow up with questions and things for our speakers today, you can do that. Stephen, thank you very much for sharing your content. Stephen. Jody and Kelly, thanks for adding your thoughts and how it plays out in Summit. And we appreciate everyone participating today.
Yep, thank you.
Thanks for having me.
Thanks. Bye-bye.